Paul over here.
Hey.
Obviously, a big, pay-per-view fight week. You're not unaccustomed to preparing for these high-level opponents and these big fight cards. But a guy like Bo Nickal, he's not really tested in the UFC and just very early into his MMA career. But just kind of looking at the hype around him, outside of the top 5, he might be the biggest fight in this division. So I'm just curious if you agree with that assessment before your fight.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. But he's still a little green in the collar. He might have all that credential in the world of wrestling, but this sport is not wrestling. We incorporate wrestling, and it's like only having a knife in a gunfight. You need to have all the tools, and I believe that my tool belt is much more equipped than his, but only Saturday night can show that. And I do believe the roots to my victory is going to be that jiu-jitsu base.
He said, when he fought, or he matched up with Gordon Ryan for that, that grappling match, that he only had 2 jiu-jitsu classes ever. Now he's, training full-time at ATT in preparation for this. So, he's always said, you can train wrestling as much as you want, but I've been doing this my whole life. So on the flip side, is there, anything that he can learn in these last few weeks that can prepare him for someone that's, someone like you that's been doing jiu-jitsu his whole life?
I don't believe you can prepare, but I don't believe you can learn everything there is to know. Like, I'm never ever going to out-wrestle Bo Nickal. We know that. And we went into the camp knowing that. So what you need to do is prepare adequately. So, will Bo take me down? Yes. Will that be a bad idea for Bo? I do believe so. I believe that if you pin me on my back, that's where I'm most dangerous. And we've seen it against people like when I've been on my back against Krylov, when I've been on my back against Jamal Hill. This is where I'm most dangerous. So I do believe that his game plan should not be to take me down and have me flat on my back.
So kind of going off of that, when we see guys that are 2 high-level grapplers, sometimes it can just turn into a striking battle because you kind of negate each other's strengths. So do you see anything from his striking at all, like from what little we've seen, that will pose any threat to you?
Yeah, he's a very good striker. He's got power in his hands. He's very, very quick. But I do believe my striking's just a little bit longer and I can use that range. The reason we moved down to middleweight was to gain that advantage in size. And I've showcased it against people like Munoz in London, where I use my length, I use my range to manipulate the distance between the fight, and I'm looking to incorporate that in this fight.
Did you have to bring in anyone specific, like just high-level wrestlers, or can you just find like high-level grapplers that can kind of mimic him?
Yeah, it's always good to have somebody who's very similar, and we did bring in a wrestler, a Serbian wrestler, and he made a huge difference to my camp. But as I said, it's not about what he can do, it's about what I can do, and that's how I'm moving forward with this fight.
And then just last one for me, can I get your thoughts on the main event between John and Stipe? Who you think will win?
This is a beautiful fight. We're going to get to see the GOAT in MSG against the greatest heavyweight of all time. I do believe John has got the credentials to beat him. I'm not writing off Stipe because there's always that puncher's chance and he does hit hard, but I just believe Jones is going to be too much for him.
Paul, to your right.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned that obviously you're super dangerous on the ground. He's known for his wrestling. You mentioned him taking you down. Do you think he's going to want to take you down?
I don't think so. I think if he's taking me down, it's to score points rather than hold me there. The vast majority of people I've went up against and have done well against me have not entered my guard. When you look at Kyle Barallo in the last fight, any time that went to the ground, he just wanted to stand up. When you look at when I fought Ozdemir in London, the same thing. Any time it went to this area on the mat, he decided he didn't want to engage in that. So in my opinion, I do believe that it's a bad place for him to be. I might not get you within the first couple of minutes, but I will eventually get you, and we've seen it happen. Krylov looked like he was raining down heavy shots onto my face. It looked like it was all over for Paul, and just when they thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
So you've been fighting ranked fighter after ranked fighter. Now you get called to fight a prospect. When you got that call, were you really surprised to hear Bo Nickal's name?
No, I kind of thought it was coming. After my last fight against Kyle, I had to think about where I was going because I was coming off of 2 losses as a middleweight. I've always wanted to be a title contender. I've always wanted to be a champion, be in that top 15 in any division. But after Kyle, I had to reassess that and was like, right, it's a little bit out of my reach at the moment. I'm maybe 2-3 fights away from it, and it needs to be about, right, what gets me excited, and it's fights. And this is a fight that gets me excited. This is a fight that motivates me. This is a fight and a venue and a card that gets Paul Craig excited to go in and showcase his jiu-jitsu. This is potentially the hardest I've ever worked in my UFC career. I've given it all in that in my camp, and I believe it's going to showcase it on Saturday night.
Last question from me. You've beaten some really good guys. People are saying that you're his first real test, but he does a lot of media, he does his own podcast, and he's constantly asked about other fighters. Do you think he's looking past you?
It would be dangerous for him to look past me. It's always dangerous to look past your opponent. Give them the respect they deserve. I hope he's not looking past me, and I hope he brings his A game. His wrestling is what has got him to this, where he is in his career. But I do believe that my jiu-jitsu is what is going to be his kryptonite on Saturday night.
Paul, right here.
Yeah.
Not that you're looking past Bo at all, but UFC did announce a card for London in March. Interested in that card at all?
Yeah, London is a good stomping ground for me. I've had some of my biggest wins in London. Always good to not travel, and it's always good to give back to UK fans. So I would love to be involved in that, but as you said, it's about getting the job done on Saturday night, first and foremost.
And just talking about Saturday, I don't know if you've seen this at all, but President Trump, Bo Nickal, seem to be pretty good buds in that sense. So how does it feel that the President of the United States is not necessarily rooting against you, but rooting for your opponent?
Yeah, I imagine the President probably is rooting for the Scottish guy to lose, but I'll be waiting at his golf course for him in Scotland. But no, it's good that it's bringing eyes to the sport. A guy like Bo Nickal, with all his credentials, of course he's going to get the love and respect from media and presidents and everybody else. But what you need to remember is this sport is not wrestling. This sport is mixed martial arts, and it's the UFC mixed martial arts. It's at the highest level, and I do believe he hasn't faced an opponent quite as hungry as me.
And last one from me. Do you have any thoughts on UFC bringing back the old gloves for this event? Or did you want to try or use the new ones, or are you indifferent?
Yeah, I've not had the experience of using the new gloves yet. Looking at the data, I think they're saying that reduces knockouts. And I believe that's probably a factor for them bringing in the old gloves. If it's not broke, why change it? I'm happy using both new and old.
Paul, right here.
Yes,
You have a pair of young Scottish fighters with you this week, Sean and Stephen Clancy. Can you just tell me about how those guys help you despite being less experienced than you?
Yeah, young Sean and Stephen are two of the up-and-coming guys within this sport in the UK scene. It's more about them getting the opportunity to come here and experience what it's like to be backstage at the UFC. I'm at the point in my career where it's about giving back and it's not taking for the sport. So if I can help as many young fighters as I possibly can, then that's what I'm going to do. Sean has showcased his prowess in Cage Warriors. I do believe he's going to get an opportunity in the UFC within the next year or two, and he's a dangerous, hungry young guy. I believe that he could step into this octagon Saturday night and get a victory over the vast majority of that roster.
You've made a career out of finishing these young up-and-coming fighters that end up being the next big thing. Could you see Bo Nickal having success in the UFC despite you having a win over him?
Yeah, it looks like if Paul Craig beats you, you've got the minerals to become a champion. When you think about Ankalaev, when you think about Khalil Roundtree, you think about Jamal Hill, there's people who have went up against and have went on to do amazing things within this sport. I do believe Bo Nickal has all the credentials and all the skill set to be a champion, but he's just got to get through me first. And I do believe that it's a tough fight for him. Like, there was a reason he dragged his heels with signing the contract, because is it an easy fight for him? No, it's certainly not. There's easier fights out there, and I believe that it's going to be an absolute barn burner on Saturday night.
You talked about the importance of being on a card at MSG, headlined by John Jones. Were you able to say that you've checked two big things off of your bucket list this week?
Yeah, definitely. Getting to come to New York as a fan and step out in front of the MSG is something that all fighters want to do within their career. When you think about where I've been as a fighter, this is my 27th fight as a UFC fighter, fighting in places like a Staple Arena, fighting in Rio, fighting in the London O2, Glasgow Hydro, fighting in T-Mobile Arena. It's the who's who, and this is one of these places that I've just checked off on my list. And as you say, I have the card with John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, potentially Jones's last fight. This is the stuff that gets me excited and gets my juices flowing, we can say.
Just one more. Did you say that Bo dragged his feet when signing this contract? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, when we were offered this fight, we signed that contract within a couple hours. And it just felt like it took maybe like 10 days for them to send back the contract. And I don't know if it was maybe he's on holiday, there's a whole host of reasons what it could be, but it just felt like it took a little bit longer than most people would have when they get a contract to fight.
Thank you. So what do you think is the best scenario for Bo Nickal in this fight? Will he strike or will he wrestle? Where do you think he's thinking of the weakness of you? Maybe just where do you think he sees the best scenario for him for this fight?
Space is not going to be Bo Nickal's friend in this fight. I believe that the way he's going to employ his game plan is to take away my space. Because if I don't have the space, I can't utilise my length. If I don't have the space in the ground, I can't utilise my jiu-jitsu. So if I was Bo Nickal, what I would do is I would hold for dear life. But I believe that my skill set can just get a little bit of space, and if I get a little bit of space, it's a dangerous situation for Bo Nickal to be involved in.
I see. Thank you. And one more question. It has become very iconic, like it's kind of becoming iconic for the strikers to sign themselves in the center of the octagon and like call their opponents for the stand and bang. And we have never seen anything like this from the wrestlers, but it would be like really enjoyable for me personally, for I know many people around the world. So do you think it can be a future for like wrestling showdowns like this one? Would you enjoy doing this? Would we see anything like this from you tomorrow or anytime soon?
So you mean like point to the floor and bum scoot across the mat?
Yeah, like doing the wrestling exchange, like in the center of the octagon, calling for it.
Yeah, so I am a fan of this sport, and I love when the strikers point to the mat and let's go. But I'm a smart guy. I know I get punched in the face for a living, but I don't want to go into a gunfight. That's not worth it. It's a 50-50 sometimes, and if you've worked so hard in your career to get to a point where you're going to try and win a match using the best skill you can, then pointing to the middle of the mat and just going into a gunfight is not the best scenario, and especially not for me. I don't want to take any extra damage. I would like to get in there, get the job done using jiu-jitsu and keep my looks as they kind of are.
I see. Thank you very much.